Brothers and sisters, the scripture for our meditation today is from Romans chapter 5. We're reading just 3 verses. Romans 5, verses 8 through 10. You can follow along in your worship folder today. We'll be kind of picking this apart and having a lot of fun learning and growing in God's message to us through this. Paul writes these words, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? For if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life?" The word of the Lord. I think you can go to the next slide just for now, and we'll sit with this for a second. It is not fair how confusing and difficult communication can be. And even once you know something, you and I understand there's a difference between knowing something and making use, like wisdom, making use of that knowledge. The Christian church is given the best words, and they're staring you in the face today. And maybe you're thinking, I've heard Romans 5 before. Maybe it seems just like another day, not a party day. And yet that makes no change to the fact that we could all be really wise today, learning from God and banking every last syllable he would give to us in the words of the gospel. It does not change how it may look or feel or sound, does not change the fact that the heart of God has been bursting with joy from eternity with one great thought: your salvation. An anniversary can hardly do justice to the great for us we hear today. Next slide. For us has a lot of senses. Communication is really hard. You can have something for you in the mail. You can have someone knock on the door. It's for you. Like you're the receiver, like it's meant for you. Someone's looking for you. That's the first kind, for you. You can have another kind of for us where it's meant like for your benefit. You know, I'm doing something for you. I didn't have to do it. You didn't need to do it, but I did it for you for your benefit, like a surprise gift. And you can have something done as like a substitute. Somebody does it for you. Oh, I was so behind. I wasn't going to get it done, and you did it for me. You did it in my place, right? So there's nuances to all of this. What does for us mean? Well, primarily for our celebration of God's grace, it's the bottom two. But it doesn't exclude any of them. In fact, there's 2 fors in Romans 5, 8 through 10. The first one's up in verse 8, and then the other one comes a little bit later. Let's talk about these fors and receive with wisdom what God is speaking and saying to our hearts today. First, can you do another click? I think the heart should pop up. It's there in verse 8. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. Love is there destined. It has a goal and a destination of being for you. God demonstrates a for you love. This is so huge because if we remained clueless and foggy, I don't know how confident we would be to put Christ the King as the name of the congregation. If we didn't have something clearly communicated that this was a love for us, his own love for us, we wouldn't be able to bank it, let alone use it, having it change the entire quality of our lives. This opening expression is Paul leaping in to your story, your sin story, and saying, please don't take love for you your own way. Don't invent it, don't create it, don't compare it to something else. God demonstrates his own love for you in this. Now, let's just pause. We're going to come right back to the demonstration. Paul is writing to the Romans. He's never been to Rome. This is sort of like the best opportunity we have to just see a to Z theological summary of Christianity. And Paul is having fun. Paul is delighting in the word that he gets to share. Let me explain. Romans 1-3 is like, it kills everybody. Jew, Gentile, I don't care who you are. Paul points at you and says, sinner, 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 sinner. You didn't know I was going to point at you, did you? I came over there too. We're everywhere. All of you. You're all sinners. And he makes it clear whether you had the law of Moses, whether you didn't have the law of Moses, we all show ourselves to be sinners and have a sin problem, and then he teaches about it. He expands it. He takes sin as a problem and he says, this is like we're enemies of God. We don't have any righteousness. We deserve death. All of these things he bundles up together before he finishes talking about the sin problem. But then he starts to teach. Maybe you know the verse, Romans 3:21. But now apart from the law, apart from any word that looks back at you like a mirror and says you have to be a sinner because you haven't done it, apart from the law, a righteousness from God has been made known. And right there is the beginning of the unfolding of his presentation of the gospel, one that he expands and expounds upon. It's like this one great, beautiful, where sin increased, grace increased all the more. It's one big, beautiful thought, and it has all these phenomenal dimensions to do. Talk about a party. Paul has a party. If you read the rest of Romans 3 and chapter 4, and now into chapter 5, Paul is just kind of taking this beautiful sphere, this diamond that's floating. Are you seeing my floating diamond? He's taking the floating diamond and he's spinning and he's looking at all of its beautiful facets. What it means to be saved by faith and not by works. That this wouldn't have to do with you. It would be entirely done by someone else. And he's just twisting this little diamond in front of everybody and pausing at every little glance and saying, do you see that? That's another aspect of this. That's another aspect of this righteousness gifted to you. So when he's getting to this part and he talks about the receiver, this is a huge moment for Paul, because they're all huge moments when you're talking about the gospel. He says, let me teach you about what it was like when we received this love of God. That's so different from all other loves. He says, God demonstrates his own love for us. God demonstrates his own love for us. So you know what a demo is like. When you have somebody like demo it for me, like I have never done this before, can you show me how it works? And then somebody's like, here's where you turn your phone on, right? And you're like, thank you for demoing. You got that already. That was so like 20 years ago. How do I turn this thing on? Where do I find these apps in here, right? You got to have somebody show you. They demo you the product. What's the point? That a demonstration, it's sort of like entrusting something, like handing it off. Teach a person to fish, and they'll fish for the rest of their life. Fish for them, right? And it's just a meal. But teach a person to fish. God did this. God taught the world to fish. God taught the world love as soon as he came to that garden. Adam and Eve had become their enemies. And God demoed his love, his own love. Nobody expected that love, did they, when I ripped up the paper? But God is entrusting this to you. He wants you to fish with it. He wants you to use it. God demonstrates his own love for us. He demos it, that his love would be received by people with its own character, with its own qualities. You shift the dime and you say, only God loves me like that. Till the day you die, you'd have such a jewel in your life. You'd have such a pause with that facet of the dime. You'd say, only God's is like that. That's where the but came from to start the sentence. Is it, but God demonstrates his... It might be possible that someone, for a good person, would dare to die, right? In the context, that's in verses 6 and 7. But to highlight and throw this out, God is going to do his own thing. Everybody else would walk into that garden and be like, Adam, Eve, you see all these gray hairs, you too. What does God do with people, with a sinner? God demonstrates his own love for us in this. Ready? While we were still sinners, which is the most loaded, worst, heinous title you can imagine. In 2 verses, in verse 10, it's got an alternate. It is enemies. That while we were God's enemies, he reconciled us to himself. So Paul has a loaded word, sinner. You hear sinner and you shudder. We should be a terrified world hiding behind the trees when God comes into this garden. Sinner is that horrible in terms of its damage in our relationship. Enemies of God, that's about the worst as it could get, isn't it? And the debt that you owed, you're supposed to die. Those two things are very clear from the Apostle Paul. While we were still sinners, loaded term, oh no, I'm a sinner. It's the worst. It is the worst. It can't get any worse than to be a sinner. Christ died for us. For a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. If you think of all the times, all the scenarios, the circumstances when God would die for someone, maybe with a really good person, but you kind of see this act of God through Jesus. While when the needle never got off of E for enemy, empty enemy, when the needle never budged a smidge, and you would expect, God will love me when. Please teach this, Christian church, to your friends. They desperately need to know this love. You do too. I do too. This love, you take this loving act, and Paul attaches it as a demonstration of God's own love. When? While we were still sinners, while we were enemies of God that explodes in all the unrighteous acts and unrighteous thoughts and unrighteous words that come out of me. Everything is unrighteous. It all hinges off of enemy. Once we are a sinful nature at odds with God and enemies with God, then I'm never going to be righteous with God and aligned with God. I'm never going to do the works God would ask me to do or hit the target of perfection because I'm an enemy ripping the commandments up one after another while I was still this, absolutely nothing off of empty. Christ died for us. It's for your benefit. You can hit the little slide if you're still there, Joshua. Thank you. It's for your benefit and it's in your place. This death is a loaded death. It's a death that's supposed to be everything you deserved. For your benefit, that's the enemy become reconciled, right? That you would benefit relationally all the way. And in your place, it's your debt being totally wiped out and taken care of. Paul is spelling out the most beautiful facets of the jewel of God's grace in our lives. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You and I need to know that first off, that sin is that terrible, but grace so perfectly has met it in the death of Jesus to die for the enemy, to pay the enemy's terrible debt. He suffered your hell. If this is true, if this is God's demo project, what's next? That's why this must be the first week in a party. It must be the first thought in a sermon. What's next? Can you go back to the reading or just look in your own verses? Verse 9, right here, verse 9, since we've now been justified by his blood, if now I am justified as I'm declared not guilty, I'm now righteous with God. If I've now been made righteous with God by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? So this is where the second half comes. Now that we know, if we know this is God's demoing his love, and the demonstration of his own love for you has come all the way to meet your empty tank and bring it to full, you are completely justified and righteous. If we can take that to the bank, if that can be our faith wisdom that we get to use every day, then what also is true? Add another layer to the cake, baby. Put some frosting on it. How much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? He wants you to see the exact diamond nature of that enemy. I was an enemy and you did this. So now, if I'm not an enemy anymore, and I am justified, verse 10, go ahead to verse 10. And now, if I'm not the enemy and I'm reconciled, he's overlapping these phrases. See how, I got to move my status. I got to move where I was before God. If I'm now reconciled, how much more will we be saved through his life? Paul takes you out of E and makes you full. And then he says, now that we're here, can we not be certain of all the rest? May every thought, word, deed, every aspect of life into the future have the confidence and the certainty that because of Christ, I need not fear that judgment day. And now everything you do from here on out, walking out this door, happens by the grace of God who reconciled you, and you're no longer an enemy. If God did this impossible, hard thing we never would have expected him to do, now what's he going to do when it's just the icing on the cake? Your future is lived in his love. Your future is covered by forgiveness. How could he not save? How would you not be spared from God's wrath through him on the end? So tell me what your life is like. Tell me by which motivators and operators deep in your heart you're going to take with you as you go to school, as you meet with friends, as you rub elbows in the workplace, you raise a family. All those thoughts of second-guessing yourself and ultimately second-guessing God. All those thoughts is, he can't love me anymore because I. Let Paul take you back to the demo work of God's own love from which everything springs. Every hope, every joy, every confidence of faith. If God did this, it's sort of like saying, if I emptied my bank account for you today and I devoted the rest of my life to building you a really nice house, do you think I'd have any problem sharing you a lunch, or pulling a pen out of my pocket if you needed a pen, if he does the hard, the impossible, how much more? It's built into his language. How much more will he not save you from wrath? So, Christian church, you've been born again. You have the new day. There's only one kind of light in this world, and it's all yours. There's only one kind of love from God. Don't mess it up. Don't cloud it with the devil's lies or your own track record. It doesn't have to do with you. It has to do with Christ who suffered and died in your place. Receive it with joy and gladness. This is yours to share freely with the world because it's God's good gifts. It's for their benefit and it's in their place. What more could we ask for? The 2 fours that Paul gives us set everything in place for a life of joy and gladness and service to the Lord. He does not force me by commands and threats and punishments. God has won me over. And I am moved by his own love for me. Amen.